And I'll be preaching this morning from Matthew chapter 24. I thought that I would not read all 51 verses, and we'll just start at verse 1. Jesus left the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, "You see all these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the close of the age?" And Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures until the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations. And then the end will come. History, as I have shared with you on various occasions, is linear. It has a definite beginning, and it is going somewhere, traveling to a particular destination, because God is at work in our midst. And history, as we know it, will come to an end as God brings it all to a victorious climax, triumphing over evil and fully establishing his kingdom on earth. Some have accused us of having a religion characterized by pie in the sky and the sweet by and by. That is really not the case. When Jesus Christ comes back, his return will be marked by judgment, separation, and reckoning. It seems, as one scholar has put it, as if we are surrounded by people who are trying to sell us tickets to the Battle of Armageddon with their seminars, their conferences, their books, their tapes, their DVDs, whatnot, trying to gin up a lot of excitement. And I think really what we need to be is just be a people that humbly obey his words and occupy till he comes. You and I, how do I say this? It seems to me, I know a lot of Christians outside of this church, and it seems to me that a lot of them live with a great deal of agitation and anxiety. And I am aware of the times in which we live. Yet in these times, you and I are to live in hope. The hope that is centered in the knowledge that one day Jesus will return for us. And that hope, regardless of what you and I face today, regardless of what we may face in the coming months or years, that hope will allow us to live freely and openly in this world. This chapter is not an easy one to interpret. And I do not come before you as one who claims authority. I just come to you and I will share with you the way I understand this the best I can. And if you and I disagree on my interpretation, well, bless your heart, we're still brothers and sisters, all right? The disciples have asked Jesus two questions. When will the temple be destroyed? Because Jesus had cursed it. And when will he return at the end of the age? The difficulty with this chapter lies in that Jesus does not make precise, distinct, separate answers to each question. His answers he kind of mixes together. It appears that verses 4 through 35 deal mostly, but not completely, with the destruction of the temple. And verses 36 through 51 appear to deal with mostly, but not exclusively, with his return to earth. So let's wade in this together and ask the Holy Spirit for illumination and clarity. Two things I would share with you this morning. The first of these is the setting. The setting. That's chapter 24, verses 1 through 35. Jesus announces impending judgment against the city of Jerusalem in chapter 23, and he immediately leaves the city and goes to the Mount of Olives there in chapter 4. Jesus leaving the city and going to the Mount of Olives, I believe it was deliberate that he left and went there because it echoes Ezekiel chapter 11, verse 23. Where the glory of God visibly in a cloud lifts above the temple, and it leaves Jerusalem and goes to the Mount of Olives. And that happens shortly before judgment fell with the Babylonian conquest in 586 BC. At the time of Jesus, the temple compound was going through a tremendous renovation. And the outer walls were being painted with a white alabaster that when the sun hit it just right, the reflection was, and the glare was so radiant that it was almost blinding. And as the disciples and Jesus are looking at the splendor of the temple and the compound and all that's being done, Jesus said it would be completely destroyed and that there would not be one stone upon another. And he said, this generation shall not pass till these things be accomplished. I believe that as I understand it, that this prophecy was fulfilled in one generation. A lot of people look at that as an end-time interpretation. I believe he was talking about that one generation because in 70 AD, 37 years later, the temple fell during the first Jewish war. Note in verse 15, the abomination of desolation. This was first prophesied in Daniel. It was fulfilled not too many years after he died. The Greek general Antiochus Epiphanes marched his army into Jerusalem. He sacrificed a pig on the altar, and he declared himself God come in the flesh. This would also be repeated by the by the Roman general Titus in 70 AD, right before he demolished the temple. These two events in history foreshadow the coming of what the New Testament calls the lawless one, the man of sin, the beast. When Jesus talked about a time of tribulation with his disciples, such as the world had never seen, during that first Jewish war, it was a time of unprecedented tribulation. Starving women ate their children. More than 1 million people died in that war. Hundreds were crucified. Over 100,000 people were sold into slavery. This was exceeded by the Holocaust in the last century. And it will be surpassed by what is called the Great Tribulation, a time so horrible that if God did not shorten those days, then no one would survive. But even as horrible as those days may be, God has set a limit on what Satan can do and set a limit on how long it can last. There are many people who say Jesus could come back at any moment. And they point to the environment in which we live. Well, I suppose Jesus could. God is God. He is all-powerful. But one thing about God is he never contradicts his own word. Look with me at verse 6. He talks about these things and he says, the end is not yet. Look at verse 8. All of these things are the beginning of sorrow. Look at verse 14. And this gospel will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. Last I heard, Wycliffe is working furiously to get the Bible translated because there are still 300 people groups who have not yet heard the gospel. All 4 gospels are emphatic that the word will cover the entire world before Jesus comes. So we need to get on the stick and get some work done for the kingdom while we still can. I think of the old hymn, "Work, for the night is coming, when man can work no more." It is after these distresses, Jesus tells us, it is after all of this that cosmic signs will appear. And these signs of which Jesus speaks in the Gospels echo the writings of Isaiah, Ezekiel, Joel, and Haggai. And they all point to the end-time judgment and the salvation of God. As I understand it, it is then that Jesus will return and everyone will see him. This results in 2 things. First, the unrepentant will mourn, for they will realize and understand that judgment has come for them. Second, the righteous will rejoice, because with the trumpet blast, and the linking passages here are 1 Corinthians 15:52 and Revelation 11:15, at the sounding of the last trumpet, at the sounding of the 7th trumpet in Revelation, God sends the angels to gather his people. And as I understand it, it is here that the rapture occurs. And it is here that the end of our sorrows forever. That is the setting. The second thing I would share with you is a surprise. And that is the last, from verse 36 on. Jesus' return will shock the world just as the flood was shocking in the days of Noah. They saw Noah and his sons build the ark. They heard Noah preach that judgment was coming. God gave them an entire century to repent. And they mocked Noah, and they ignored Noah, and they laughed at Noah, and they went about their daily lives until it was too late. So it will be at Christ's return. And Jesus offers 2 illustrations for us here. 2 men in the field and 2 women grinding at the mill. These 2 illustrations have been used to point to a pre-tribulation rapture, God coming and taking them away. I, with great humility, would suggest that that is probably not correct. The reason I say that is when you look at Jesus, when you look at his teachings throughout the gospel, when people are being taken away, or when things are being taken away, such as unfruitful vines, unfruitful branches, they are being taken away to judgment. And I would suggest that these were also taken away in judgment because they were not prepared. They were not ready. This same holds true for the owner of the house, the thief coming in the night. This has nothing to do with the timing of the rapture, but the fact of the rapture, that Jesus Christ is coming again, and the man suffers loss because he is not ready. He is not prepared. He is not watchful. And then Jesus closes out this chapter with the parable of the stewards. All 3 of these men knew that their master would one day return. None of them lived in ignorance. None of them were without knowledge. They all knew that the master would one day return. They did not know when, but they knew he would come. 2 of the men, they acted on that knowledge, and they were busy carrying out their master's will. They were taking care of what he had given them. The 3rd man, he had the same knowledge, but he was careless. He was self-centered. He was irresponsible. And when his master returned, he experienced disaster and destruction. God has made us stewards of His grace. We will be held accountable and answerable to Him. Since we know that He is coming, or even if He delays His coming 10 years, 40 years, 50 years, each and every one of us are eternity bound. And so because of those two facts, let us not live as fools, but let us be wise and be busy carrying out our Master's business. He said, when the Son of Man returns, will He find faith? May He at least find it here at Salem Chapel.